In 2019, a man died in a high-security jail cell, leaving behind a void that the world has tried to fill with 1,000 theories. And as the boxes of evidence were pried open, a dark silhouette began to emerge. From the glitz of New York high society to the silent shores of Little St. James, the question was never just what he did, but who allowed and guided him to do it. Welcome, step closer. Tonight, we step inside the machine that built the enigma of Jeffrey Epstein. We'll examine the threads connecting him to global intelligence and dip into the newly released files that were supposed to give us answers, but instead gave us more questions. And before we continue, a brief warning. The following content discusses sensitive topics and criminal investigations. We are here to report on public records, depositions, and the prevailing theories discussed by millions online. We are not here to accuse individuals of crimes, but to explore the gaps in the official narrative. Now, let's try to unfold the mystery. Born in 1953 in Brooklyn to a middle-class family, Epstein was raised in a largely secular Jewish household. His parents were not politically connected, not wealthy, and not part of any known intelligence or diplomatic circles. He attended public schools and later taught briefly at the Dalton School, an elite private institution in Manhattan, despite lacking a college degree. His early life appears unremarkable, and that absence of origin story is precisely what makes his later ascent so difficult to explain. There is no clear moment where Epstein crosses from obscurity into power, no documented breakthrough that accounts for his sudden access to wealth, politicians, royalty, and heads of industry. Instead, what exists is a long paper trail of proximity, relationships, and invitations that only becomes visible in hindsight. It was this trail, rather than any single ledger, that eventually came to be known as the so-called Epstein list. Not a document Epstein kept in a drawer, but a constellation of names drawn from flight logs, contact books, emails, calendars, photographs, and sworn testimony. Individually, these records appear mundane. Taken together, they map repeated access to Epstein's world by some of the most powerful figures on Earth. The importance of this list does not lie in proving criminal guilt. It lies in establishing patterns. Who had entry, who returned, and who remained in orbit long after Epstein's behavior was rumored, exposed, or legally documented. But more importantly, is who may have benefited from that access. That unresolved question sits at the center of the case, and it is why Epstein's otherwise unremarkable beginnings continue to matter long after his death. For a while, this list was the internet's most hunted treasure. We were told it didn't exist, then told it was just a phone book. And for years, journalists, victims, and independent researchers were assured that there was nothing coherent to uncover. No hidden structure, no central ledger of power. But in late 2023, the dam broke. Judge Loretta Preska ordered the unsealing of records from Jeffrey V. Maxwell, a civil case long treated as peripheral, but quietly loaded with sealed material. By January 2026, the Department of Justice, under the Epstein Files Transparency Act, dumped roughly 3.5 million pages of investigative material into the public domain, not as a curated release, but as a data flood. The release includes over 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. The FBI confirmed they reviewed roughly 6 million pages in total, suggesting that what the public received was still only a portion of the whole. The files contain thousands of references to global figures. Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew, for example, are mentioned hundreds of times, not just in flight logs, but in private emails and guest lists for dinners Epstein organized. These were not random overlaps. They show repetition, familiarity, and access sustained over years. And in the cultural aftershock of that release, something else happened. Figures adjacent to the scandal began shaping their own narratives in public, sometimes with startling claims. In early February 2026, Lady Victoria Hervey, described as a former girlfriend of Prince Andrew, reacted publicly to the newly released Epstein files and made an explosive claim that Epstein is alive and hiding in Israel. Whether this is true, delusion, provocation, or deliberate misdirection, it shows how quickly the case becomes a battlefield of narrative control, because the official story still leaves so many gaps. The 2026 release brought additional names into public view. Like the billionaire Elon Musk, who reportedly reached out to Epstein regarding Caribbean visits, former White House advisors, whose names appear in scheduling notes and contact directories, and business moguls like Bill Gates and Steve Tisch, referenced in contexts that go beyond chance encounters. Some of these individuals denied ever going to the island or having any relationship with Epstein, and the files themselves do not allege crimes. But denial alone does not erase proximity. And despite the promise embedded in the Name Transparency Act, the redactions on these files are heavy, although faulty. Thousands of pages remain blacked out, and some of them protect the alleged offenders instead of the victims. The DOJ's July 2025 memo stated that no credible evidence was found of a blackmail ring. Critics point to a contradiction that refuses to go away. Why redact the names of politically exposed persons if they are merely incidental contacts? If the goal was total transparency, why does relevant data remain in the dark? And why are the same names repeatedly shielded across unrelated documents? The most enduring theory isn't merely that Epstein was a criminal, but that he was an asset. Not a rogue predator acting alone, but a facilitator operating within a larger architecture of leverage. Proponents argue Epstein was a honeypot operative tasked by intelligence agencies, most notably Mossad or the CIA, to compromise world leaders. The theory is that he did not require every visitor to be complicit, but he created an environment that was designed to generate, as the Russians say, compromat. For example, in 2019, former U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta was allegedly told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave the case alone. This claim surfaced during scrutiny of the 2008 non-prosecution agreement that allowed Epstein to avoid federal charges. Later, Acosta denied this under oath in 2025, stating he was misquoted and misunderstood. But the theory persists because of the extraordinary leniency of his initial sweetheart deal and because of other breadcrumbs that refuse to align with coincidence. But now, in 2026, a confidential FBI informant claimed they became convinced Epstein was operating as an agent for Israeli intelligence, and the informant's document reportedly framed these claims as part of a counterintelligence concern rather than fringe internet rumor. The same document claims the informant took notes on calls between Epstein and Dershowitz, and then alleged Mossad contacted Dershowitz for debriefings connected to Epstein. The record itself, as reported, emphasizes these are assertions by the informant and are not independently corroborated within the document. This does not prove the hypothesis, yet, but it expands the shape of it, because the state actor theory has always been fueled less by one smoking gun and more by the repeated appearance of intelligence language around Epstein, sometimes spoken casually, sometimes documented formally, and sometimes embedded in the machinery of law enforcement itself. Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, is often cited as one such breadcrumb. A media titan whose career spanned continents, Maxwell died under mysterious circumstances in 1991. He was buried with honors in Israel, and his funeral was attended by senior Israeli officials, an unusual tribute for a foreign publisher. He has been widely alleged, though never officially confirmed, to have worked with Mossad. Witnesses like Ari Ben-Menashe have claimed on record that Maxwell and Epstein worked for the state as early as the 1980s. These claims remain disputed, but they persist because they connect otherwise isolated anomalies into a narrative framework. And proponents of this theory view Epstein's connections as evidence of his state-level value, but critics counter that Epstein curated a circle of high-status individuals who may have been unaware of his private conduct, drawn in by money, prestige, and access. But that explanation strains under scrutiny. Would such powerful individuals be so unaware of who they were doing business with, especially after repeated visits and private interactions? Unlikely, and Epstein's international mobility, combined with persistent rumors of foreign protection, adds more fuel to the matter. His Austrian passport, revealed in a 2019 bail hearing, for example, deepened those suspicions. The document was expired and bore a fake name with a Saudi Arabia address. Epstein's legal team said the passport was for personal security, to protect against kidnappers targeting wealthy Jewish men abroad. That explanation may account for possession, but not for how such a document was obtained or tolerated during international travel. Victim depositions add another layer. Testimony from women like Sarah Ransom describes sophisticated surveillance systems hidden in vents and picture frames in Epstein's Manhattan mansion. Cameras placed not for security, but for observation. The DOJ's 2025 Sentinel Review found no record of Epstein being a formal informant or asset for any intelligence agency. However, many believe that the absence of evidence is the official answer, and for many observers, the accumulation of breadcrumbs suggests something more complex than a lone offender. So one of many key questions remains officially unanswered. Was Epstein the designer of everything, or just the contractor? Some researchers believe the answer lies not with Epstein himself, but with a secretive group of billionaires sometimes referred to as the Mega Group, co-founded by Leslie Wexner and Charles Bronfman. The group is described as informal, focused on Jewish causes, philanthropy, and global influence, operating through private relationships rather than public structures. This group is frequently cited in attempts to explain Epstein's mysterious source of wealth. Epstein had no public clients, no visible hedge fund, and no Wall Street record that could justify his lifestyle. Yet in 1991, Leslie Wexner granted Epstein total legal authority over his personal fortune. Epstein could sign checks, buy planes, and sell property in Wexner's name. Epstein's Manhattan mansion, the largest private home in the city, was purchased or possibly gifted from Wexner for a fraction of its value. Why would a billionaire give such power to a man with no degree or financial track record? Official records say Wexner was deceived, that Epstein misrepresented his abilities and intentions, but interpretations diverge depending on how one views the surrounding facts. To some, Epstein didn't find the money. The money found him, positioning him as a bridge between billionaires and political elites. Theorists argue Wexner was the bank, funding Epstein's lifestyle as a lure. Wexner says he severed ties in 2007 after discovering financial misconduct. Yet 2026 files show Epstein continued to use Wexner-linked funds for years after that alleged break. If Wexner's story is accurate, then how did Epstein lose his power of attorney and still maintain a billion-dollar lifestyle, complete with private jets, islands, and international residences? Beyond money, there is symbolism and architecture. Victims like Virginia Giuffre and Sarah Ransom described a temple-like structure on Little St. James, the Epstein's Island, with a gold dome and blue stripes. Officially explained as a music room or gym, the design resembles Islamic or Orthodox styles, with unusual modifications. This fueled occult and satanic theories, although no evidence supports ritual activity. Still, the structure stands as another example of Epstein's potential connections. And while many aspects of the case remain opaque, several specific links to Israeli figures and institutions are public record. The most prominent is Epstein's relationship with Ehud Barak. Barak, a former Israeli prime minister and defense minister, represents the most significant state-level contact in Epstein's circle. Media reporting, flight logs, and photographs confirm Barak visited Epstein's Manhattan townhouse and other properties multiple times over nearly 2 decades. Barak later framed the relationship as social and business-oriented, stating Epstein introduced him to investors. He denied knowledge of Epstein's crimes or involvement in illegal activities. But the newer discussion around Barak does not exist in isolation. It reappears repeatedly in the framing of the 2026 files by outlets that argue Israel functions as a strategic node in Epstein's influence network, linking U.S. political power, Gulf elites, and international diplomacy, and raising unresolved questions about why Epstein retained elite protection and access long after his 2008 conviction. Even critics who dismiss the intelligence theory still have to contend with the pattern: the same state-level names, the same doors opening, the same impunity surviving scandal after scandal. Ghislaine Maxwell's lineage remains the most persistent bridge between Epstein and the Israeli state. Her father Robert Maxwell's burial on the Mount of Olives, attended by Israeli leadership, continues to invite speculation. The Maxwell to Mossad theory suggests that Ghislaine inherited her father's alleged intelligence connections and helped facilitate Epstein's operations. No court has affirmed this, but the theory endures because it connects family history, state honors, and Epstein's unexplained protections. And the 2026 informant claim, as described in reporting, folds directly into this lineage theory by placing alleged intelligence language not just in the mouths of online theorists, but inside an FBI record. In that report, the informant alleges Epstein had a close personal relationship with Barack, and even claims Epstein was trained as a spy under him, a statement that reads like mythology, yet survives in public discourse precisely because so many parts of the case already feel unreal. Epstein's charitable giving also intersected with Jewish and Israel-adjacent causes. Records show donations to organizations like Seeds of Peace, which focuses on Israeli-Palestinian youth engagement. These donations resemble status-seeking philanthropy common among New York's wealthy elite rather than evidence of covert funding. Still, they contribute to a pattern in which Epstein's social, financial, and political worlds repeatedly intersected with individuals and institutions tied to Israel, without ever clarifying the nature of those intersections. And as survivors and observers have noted, even when new document dumps claim to prioritize accountability, the reality often feels inverted. Victims are exposed while many enablers remain unnamed, redacted, or untouched. That perception has become part of the Israel Connections narrative too, because it reinforces the same central question. If the official files are enough to close the case, why does the public keep finding reasons to believe the truth is being managed instead of revealed? All the unanswered questions may never be answered, because on August 10, 2019, at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, a perfect storm of failures led to Epstein's death, at a time when he was one of the most guarded inmates in the country. The latest DOJ release included full autopsy photos and malfunctioning camera logs. The official ruling remains suicide. The report cites gross negligence by guards Tova Noel and Michael Thomas, who were allegedly sleeping and surfing the internet while Epstein died. Forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, hired by Epstein's brother, noted neck fractures more consistent with homicidal strangulation than suicidal hanging. The DOJ released common area footage in 2025 showing no one entered the tier, but theorists note that the camera directly outside Epstein's cell was the only one that failed to record. The picture that emerges for many observers is simple. Epstein died before he could testify. With the 2019 indictment looming, he was the only person who could verify the list, his connections, and who directly supported him. His death ensured that while names could be released, context and confirmation died with him. And that void is exactly where claims like "he's alive in Israel" gain traction. Because Epstein's case has trained the public to expect the unexpected and taught that important truths may always remain out of reach. In a world where the official story never fully explains the money, the protection, the passports, the surveillance, and the silence, theories will belong in the same room as the facts. Thanks to Judge Loretta Preska's order, we now have more documents than ever. We have logs, emails, and a little bit of the transparency the public demanded. Yet the pattern is difficult to ignore. The more the government reveals, the more it appears to manage the narrative rather than resolve it. The FBI says Epstein acted alone, but theorists say he was the tip of an intelligence iceberg. One side sees tragic bureaucratic failure, the other sees a carefully engineered containment strategy for the powerful. The DOJ asserts there is no client list, no blackmail ring, and no conspiracy. But after reviewing the evidence, following the money, and hearing the silence, do you believe the machine has been dismantled, or has it simply moved further into the shadows? The files are out. The choice to accept or doubt them is yours. Let us know your theory in the comments. Thank you for venturing beyond the veil with us. If you enjoyed the video, then please subscribe and join the watchers. The shadows have more secrets to reveal. Until next time.